Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz.
Hi.
I see you're in Martha's Vineyard now enjoying your summer, but we're waiting
Yes.
for you to come here.
Okay.
All right, so let's begin with your favorite subject besides the law, sports. The Jewish Olympics, known as the Maccabiah Games, bring together athletes from across the globe, and the 20th Games are being held in Israel again this summer. Lots of Jewish athletes like basketball star Tal Brody and legendary swimmer Mark Spitz got their start at these very games. And among this year's star-studded visitors were two of America's Olympic gold medal swimmers who also won gold medals at the Maccabiah Games in the beginning of their careers. Well, we caught up with Jason Letzak and Lenny Kreiselberg, so let's hear what's on their minds.
Hey, I'm Jason Letzak, four-time Olympian from USA and one-time Maccabiah Games champion ×4.
My name is Lenny Kreiselberg, also swimmer, four-time Olympic gold medalist for the United States. Participated in Maccabiah in 2001 and won 2 gold medals. So the question I have, where do you see Israel 5 years from now? Where is the country going to be growth-wise, politically-wise, in the world? How's the world going to view Israel 5 years from now?
The Talmud says that prophecy ended with the destruction of the Second Temple, and anybody who tries to prophesy the future is either a fool or a knave. Of course, nobody knows what Israel will look like in 5 years. I can only give you some general assessments. Israel will be stronger economically because it has a very powerful basis of an economy based on smarts and modern technology, unlike the Saudis, who are in trouble now because oil is becoming less important to the world and their population is increasing dramatically. So I think Israel will be an economic superpower. It will retain its status as a military superpower. And my hope and prayer is that within the next 5 years, there will be some peaceful resolution. I just want to congratulate the Maccabiah athletes. It's so important for the world to see Jews being excellent in athletics. I grew up at a time when there were claims that Jews were not strong, and of course we had Hank Greenberg showing the Germans, and we had others who were making the case for Jewish physical strength. And now, of course, Jews compete on an equal basis in all sports, whether it be baseball or football or basketball. And I'm thrilled. A few years ago, I was actually invited to come to the Maccabiah Games to play a chess match against my former client and dear friend, Natan Sharansky. But of course, I knew that Natan was a fantastic chess player who even perfected his endgame while he served time in the Soviet prison. So I rejected the offer. I countered with an offer if Natan Sharansky would play me one-on-one in basketball. But he rejected that offer, so we came to an impasse. He would clearly beat me in chess, and I think I would take him on in one-on-one basketball. So I think I'm now relegated to being a fan of the Maccabiah Games, and I enjoy watching them. And one day I would love to come to Israel and watch them in person.
Absolutely. I mean, the opening ceremony here was just so exciting to watch. There was even a marriage proposal and marriage that took place during the games. I don't know if you saw that. But I think we're just going to have to find another sport for you to compete in.
Okay.
Maybe debate. Maybe we'll try to sport.
Look, one-on-one basketball or horse. I can still beat my 22-year-old athletic grandson in horse because I have a corner jump shot, which I never miss.
Good
so if the Maccabiah develops a sport called horse,
there we go.
or sus, it would be even shorter, 3 letters. I would come to Israel and compete.
All right, well, we'll talk to the director of the Maccabiah Games and see if we can make that happen.
Okay.
All right, Professor. So let's turn to our next topic, a little more serious, Israel's all-time favorite organization of UNESCO. The United Nations cultural body has just passed a resolution characterizing the old city of Hebron as a Palestinian heritage site that is, quote, endangered by Israel. And it's no surprise that the Israeli government is infuriated. Cooper Sellington from New Jersey has a question about this very issue.
Hi, Professor Dershowitz. I'm Cooper Sellington from New Jersey. I want to hear what you think about UNESCO declaring Hebron a Palestinian site, and if you think the Katz Deli is next in New York.
Well, I think Katz Deli certainly deserves to be treated by UNESCO as a Palestinian heritage site. Katz Deli contributed to the death of more Jews than probably most terrorists with its fatty pastrami. Look, it's a joke, and that's the way it should be treated. It should be the subject of late-night humor. The idea that the burial place of Sarah, which Abraham bought from Ephron in a legitimate sale. Ephron offered it to him for free, and Abraham insisted on paying so that it would be a binding contract. The Jewish connection to Hebron goes back, thousands of years, well before Muhammad was born, well before there was any religion called Islam, and well before the Palestinian people emerged and claimed peoplehood. And UNESCO is the laughingstock of the world, and it ought to be treated as the laughingstock of the world. We ought not to take it seriously. I was very proud of Prime Minister Netanyahu reading from Bereshit the story of Abraham buying the area that is now regarded as a Palestinian heritage site. So let's mock UNESCO. I think Israel should continue to decrease its contributions. I think the United States should stop contributing to UNESCO. It's interesting. 50 years ago, when I lived in Cambridge, they went around giving us charity boxes on Halloween to collect money for UNESCO. And my children and I refused to do that, even 50 years ago, because it had shown its anti-Israel bias even back then. And we went around collecting charity for Israel rather than for UNESCO. So I think UNESCO is going to end up in the trash bin of history because of its absurd misuses of history and morality. So let's not take this seriously. Let's mock it. Let's campaign to have Katz's put on the list of protected UNESCO sites that Jews are endangering, and let's move forward to serious and important issues.
All right. Well, Professor, let's turn to the Gaza Strip now. It's been a decade since the Islamist group Hamas has taken control of the coastal enclave, and today report after report are coming out showing how unlivable Gaza has become. There are around 2 million people living in the Strip, yet healthcare, education, electricity, and fresh water are on the decline. Israel's transportation minister, Israel Katz, seems to think he has a solution to the humanitarian crisis we're witnessing, and it comes in the form of an artificial island. So let's check out the new video he's released showing off his idea.
The Artificial Island Initiative is aimed at providing an answer to a reality that is bad for the Palestinians and not good for Israel. Today, Israel continues to be perceived as being responsible for the Gaza Strip and is, to a large extent, the only lifeline to it, even though it withdrew from the Strip over a decade ago. Construction of an artificial island with a port and civilian infrastructure installations off the coast of Gaza will provide the Palestinians a humanitarian, economic, and transportation gateway to the world without endangering Israel's security. The artificial island, which will be internationally financed, built, and owned, will be constructed about 3 miles off the coast of Gaza. Cargo and passenger ports, port operation and management facilities, water desalination, electricity and gas installations, as well as logistics centers will be built on the island. In order to ensure that security threats are addressed, Israel will remain in control of security in the sea around the island and of security inspection in the port. An international policing force will be responsible for security and public order on the island and for a checkpoint on the bridge which will connect the island to the coast. The ability to secure the island will be significantly greater than if a port were to be built on the Gaza coast itself, and should the need arise, the island could be disconnected from the Strip. In addition to its humanitarian and economic importance and distinct security advantages, the Artificial Island Initiative will strengthen the cooperation and relations between Israel and the countries in the region and in the international arena. In time, the Artificial Island Initiative could also promote deep positive changes in the Gaza Strip and a better future in the Middle East.
Now, Professor, I know that was a long video, but we want to kind of know, what is your take on the idea of building an artificial island off of the Gaza coast? Is this something that is a viable solution?
Well, I hadn't heard it before. It sounds like certainly an idea worth considering. I know my friends at WaterGen, this company that produces water out of the air, has offered to provide water machines to Gaza to help with the humanitarian crisis. And I think it's very important for Israel to contribute to solving the humanitarian crisis, even though it was created entirely by Hamas. Look, when Israel left 10 years ago, the Gaza Strip could have become Singapore on the Mediterranean. Europe was prepared to pour in money, a Marshall Plan, but Hamas turned every dollar into a weapon to be used against Israel, building terror tunnels and rockets instead of schools and hospitals. And the only risk I see of building this beautiful island is it might strengthen Hamas's hold on the Gaza. Right now, Hamas is not particularly popular among Gazans because they're suffering as the result of Hamas policies. If Hamas doesn't change its policies and is given the reward of this incredibly beautiful and expensive and innovative island, it could mean more rockets and more terror tunnels, because they'd have more money to allocate to these kinds of terrorist activities. But it's worth considering, and anything that relieves the humanitarian, self-inflicted humanitarian problem on Gaza is a benefit to humanity. So I think it should be seriously considered. And I think more and more ideas like this have to come forward. Israel is a country of innovation, a country of ideas, and I think the more ideas, the better.
All right, well, speaking of Palestinian rights, last week I personally had the opportunity to travel to the Barkan Industrial Park, one of 16 Israeli industrial zones in the West Bank that are employing thousands and thousands of Palestinians. Barkan specifically has 120 businesses and factories with a workforce of 20,000, half of which are Palestinian, and they receive the same salaries, benefits, and conditions as Israelis according to Israeli law. Salaries that are significantly higher than they would be receiving if they were to be working outside of these industrial zones. And when you meet the people that are working in these companies, both Palestinian and Israeli alike, they claim that industrial zones are the path towards peace. They get along, they work together, they even feel part of one big family of sorts. So, at the same time, we're seeing many human rights organizations that are claiming that these industrial zones are a violation of the rights of Palestinians because they harm the Palestinian economy by providing jobs to Palestinians while occupying vast amounts of land that the Palestinians see as a part of their future state. Now, Professor Dershowitz, what is your take on these industrial zones? Are they something that is negative or positive for the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations?
Well, as usual, it's a mixed picture. There are some very positive elements. It employs many, many Palestinians. The tragedy of SodaStream having to move from Ma'ale Adumim to the Negev and causing the employment of fewer and fewer Palestinians is something that certainly, if it wasn't caused by it, was contributed to by the BDS movement. And as you know, there are two BDS movements, one that wants to boycott everything that has anything to do with Israel. That's the official BDS movement. And then there's kind of the Peter Beinart BDS movement, which says that there ought to be boycotts of anything manufactured or produced in the West Bank occupied territories. Look, while there is an occupation and while there are settlements, which I've long opposed since the 1970s, I think Israel ought to be working with the Palestinians to help relieve humanitarian problems and to help employ Palestinians. But as a long-term solution, I think Israel needs to make peace with the Palestinians. There has to be a two-state solution. Israel will hold on to the settlement blocks in exchange for an equal number of dunim of land in parts of now Israel. But I think settlements outside of the settlement blocks will, in the end, have to come to an end. How that happens is complex and will be subject to very difficult negotiations. But I don't think that Israel should be condemned for employing Palestinians and helping them and their families live decent lives. So on balance, as a temporary measure, I support these industrial zones. I hope the time will come when they won't be needed, or when Israel and the Palestinians can create zones both in Israel and in Palestinian areas that are under the sovereignty of whichever country controls the area in which the industrial parks exist. So a mixed answer to a complicated and interesting question.
No, it was definitely very complicated. When I went to the Barkhan Industrial Zone, I was almost shocked by what I was seeing. And I think that people have to see these areas on the ground before they can really come to a conclusion about what is taking place.
No, I agree. You know, I went to SodaStream with Danny Grossman a few years ago while it was in Ma'ale Adumim, and we interviewed many of the workers. We saw, you know, Arab women sitting next to Haredi women working together, producing a very important and great product. And yet many in the international community condemned the presence of SodaStream in Ma'ale Adumim. So it's a complicated issue. And in the meantime, Israel is, I think, doing the right thing by trying to employ Palestinians on the West Bank.
All right, well, turning to the United States, headlines are continuing to come in about the Russian intervention in the 2016 elections and are now pointing to Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr. Now, how do you see this developing, Professor Dershowitz? I heard you're also writing a book about Trump's legal problems, which sounds like it's a bit early because he's only been in office for half of a year.
Well, everything is early in the Trump administration. Everything's happening so quickly. I am writing a book. It'll be both an ebook and a regular book. It's called Trumped Up, How the Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. It includes a chapter on Israel and the attacks on the Prime Minister of Israel and the attempt to criminalize his behavior as well. But it's primarily about the United States, obviously, and about the Trump administration. I think we have to distinguish between political opposition, and I am politically opposed to anybody in the Trump team having received information from the Russians. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, whether it was a crime, and I can't find anything in the criminal law that would prohibit that kind of collaboration. So something can be wrong but not criminal. Something can be a sin but not a crime. And I think we have to keep making that distinction. I have seen nothing so far by the Trump administration that warrants criminal prosecution, but I've seen much that warrants political criticism and even condemnation.
Interesting. All right, well, we're running short on time, so I do want to move on to our next topic, although we could stay on this one for a lot longer. All right, the UK court has set a new hearing in the case of a terminally ill baby whose parents refused to give up. Donald Trump even commented or tweeted about this issue. 11-month-old Charlie Gard suffers from a rare genetic disease that has left him brain damaged and unable to breathe alone. His parents are fighting to bring him abroad for experimental therapy, which could offer him a chance to improve. But European doctors say the therapy just won't help and will cause the baby more suffering. Now, a British court is giving the parents a chance to present fresh evidence that little Charlie should receive that treatment. The case has garnered interest all over the world, and Yael Nesher from Israel has a question about this issue.
Hi, Professor Dershowitz. I'm Yael. I follow your show, and I wanted to know what is your opinion about the legal and moral aspects of Charlie Gard's case.
Well, thank you, Yael. I don't think this is a close case. I think the British courts are just dead wrong. I think parents have the right to decide the fate of their children. This is not an issue of whether the government should pay for terminal care or pay for a procedure which is unlikely to work. This is an issue where the parents are prepared to pay, where they've been offered free medical care in the United States. And the parents have a right to determine the fate of their child. The state should not be intervening in this. The parents are well-intentioned. They may be wrong, but it's their decision. It's not the decision of the government. This is exactly the kind of case that turns people off on the European Court of Human Rights, on the European Union, on the Badinsky courts that determine that they're going to interfere in the right of a parent. Look, this child will almost certainly die, but I'd rather see this child die after getting every bit of medical care in the hands of her mother and father, rather than with the state taking the child away or preventing the parents from using every last recourse. Just put yourself in the position of a parent who tragically has to face this situation. Wouldn't you want to take every last measure, even if it's very, very unlikely? I think the court should get out of this. I think the government should get out of this and leave this family alone to do what they think is right. And the result will almost certainly not be a happy one, but the parents will at least know that they did everything in their power to try to save the life of this young child.
Can you kind of outline some of the difference between how American courts and European courts are handling this issue?
I don't think this would be an issue in the American courts. I can't imagine any court intruding and denying the parent the right to treat their child in this manner. I mean, the implications of this are horrendous. It means the courts will second-guess parents. Now, you know, we're not talking about parents denying medical care to a child. American cases do prevent Christian Scientists and Jehovah's Witnesses and others from endangering the life of their children by engaging in religious practices that prohibit blood transfusions, etc. This is not that case. And so I think I can say with confidence that no reasonable American court would prevent a parent from administering every last bit of medical help to a potentially dying child in an effort to save that child. I think the British law and American law are completely different on this. I think European law and American law in general are different on this. And this raises, you know, a profound question of the power of courts and the power of government to intrude into the life of a family.
All right, turning to a happier topic. Our last question is pure sports trivia. It also comes from the current Maccabiah games, where we caught up with Todd Shays, the coach of the USA basketball team. After Todd's USA team thoroughly beat arch-rival Russia, Todd had a question which we think will even stump you. Of course, we all know about Todd's famous Uncle Dolph and his cousin Danny, who both starred in the NBA. But Todd's father, Herman, who was Dolph's younger brother, set a dubious record for losing 2,000 consecutive professional basketball games. How was this possible, and which team did he play for?
Oh, that's easy. The Washington Generals, and of course they lost to the Harlem Globetrotters repeatedly.
And you just know this niche little answer. I thought you weren't going to get it. We thought that was going to stump you.
Dolph Shays made one of the most famous statements in sports. You know, Dolph Shays was famously married and happily married for many years to the same woman. And he said he and Wilt Chamberlain together slept with 10,001 women.
Wow.
Wilt Chamberlain bragged about having slept with 10,000 women. So that was Dolph Shays' response. Dolph Shays was a great ball player. I remember him both as a college ball player and as a professional ball player. I actually shared a locker room with him once in Madison Square Garden when I was playing for Brooklyn Talmudical Academy. And I was with him, probably about a dozen years ago. We were at the funeral of Bob Wolf, a great sports lawyer. And Dolph Shays was one of the, great ball players in history. So thank you for reminding me of him and for reminding me of the Harlem Globetrotters. Did I get the answer right, by the way?
You did get the answer right. How could you have not? We thought it was going to stump you. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today, Professor. Thank you so much for your time. And for all of our guests, if you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.